Hello, Tampa Bay fans. You're listening to The William Haynes Show, your online radio home for Tampa Bay sports talk and Rays postgame shows. Stay tuned throughout baseball season for live coverage after most Rays games with comprehensive coverage of all 162 games from April through October. Got something to say? We'd love to hear it. Give us a call, internationally toll-free. 877-566-1020 or send us a tweet at WHBC Official. Don't go anywhere. Tonight's program will be starting in just a couple of minutes.
HBC. The Rays were bound to lose a series at some point. It is a good evening to you and how you be. William Haynes here, you there, at 10:34 on this Wednesday night. This Rays postgame edition is live from the WHBC studio in Clearwater, Florida. It was a loss in extras this afternoon in Chicago for the Rays as they fall by a score of 8-7. They lose. Also, their first series in 11 tries, they were, I think, 9-0-2 in their last 11 series. So they were, any way you want to look at that run that they were on, where they go from 19 to 19 to basically 19 games above 500 in just a matter of a month. With this series loss, probably this little run that the team has been having is probably coming to a close. And I think there was no question that the Glasnow injury and the news of that was probably affecting the team last night in their 3-1 loss. It seemed like they came out a little bit better today, maybe not early in the game, as Lucas Giolito had a no-hitter going into the fourth inning, and Ryan Yarbrough had another start where he gives up 7 runs and 10 hits, and unfortunately he's no stranger to those kind of starts. Ends up getting a chance to go 7, though, which is just really the most Ryan Yarbrough thing I think that could happen, and I think really didn't look bad, but didn't look great. He was just kind of himself. He was throwing his pitches, and of course when you have 10 hits, it was just slider down and away to right-handers that were just being dumped into the opposite field time after time after time, and it got a little bit frustrating there. And but I think the most important part was that the offense was able to come back a couple of times. The Rays were down 4-0 in the 5th, and also 7-2 in the 6th, and were ultimately able to come back late in the game. It was in the 8th inning with a Manuel Margot double that scored Phillips from first. So they did end up calling it a double, or at least it says ESPN, but it was a really crazy play. It was basically a single, and on a full count with 2 outs, Brett Phillips running, and he was a pinch runner in that inning, is able to get from first to home on, again, what is basically a single. And that capped off, again, their huge comeback. But then you look later in the game, and a very Rays-esque kind of loss where they leave a runner in scoring position with 1 out in the 9th. and then do the same in the 10th, but basically with no outs. And so you don't get a single man in either of those situations, and then you're putting more and more pressure on a bullpen, which really has been terrific. The bullpen's earned run average 0.74 in the team's last 12 games, and that was lowered again today with another terrific showing from a lot of guys, Fire Eyes and Castillo, and then Fairbanks, who ultimately ended up getting the loss. So obviously not the pitchers to blame. Maybe a Ryan Yarbrough perhaps. But in an 8-7 loss in 10 innings, and the Rays are now 3-6 this season in extra innings, it's really hard to find just one thing to blame. They do go 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position. So the last 2 days in like the post-Glasnow era, if you will, the Rays are 1 for 20 with runners in scoring position, which is good for what I believe an 0.50 average, something like that, and they leave 6 men on base, and so it was a difficult going from that regard. And but they faced some really good pitching in this series. They faced some really good lineups. I think you do give the Rays credit, even in a series loss, for a lot of things that they were able to accomplish. Jose Abreu went, he was 0 for 8 going into today, and he finished, 1 for 14, and a guy that was the MVP of the American League last year and has had back-to-back RBI titles, so that you were able to silence him. Also, Yermin Mercedes went 0 for 8 in the series. A lot of really good hitters for Chicago were kind of silenced and wiped out by some really terrific Rays pitching. And the offense, you would say, in this series, outside of maybe the middle game, wasn't too bad either. So they definitely did enough on all sides of the ball to give themselves a chance to maybe win this series, but it was just not enough right there at the end. And we're no stranger to this, where the Rays are close in a game late, and they leave runners in scoring position, in the 8th, 9th, and then in this case, the 10th inning, which the 10th especially, they're no stranger to straining that runner at second base. So to me, that's the main takeaway for the loss. And for Ryan Yarbrough, you would say a not-so-good start. It seems like maybe 1 out of every 3 starts, this is what you're going to get. You look at his total for this season, his game log. You're seeing several games of 5 or 6 innings, around 8, 9, 10 hits, 5, 6 earned runs. And in a couple of those games, the Rays were actually able to stick around, surprisingly. So unfortunate for him, but like we discussed last night, just about everyone in the starting rotation is going to have to step up with Glasnow's injury. I don't think Yarbrough will be pitching really behind an opener maybe at all the rest of the season. Shane McClanahan is going to have to get fully stretched out now, as the Rays have been kind of handling him with kids' gloves, but now he's really a de facto member of the rotation for real. Rich Hill, who I believe is probably on the downslope, more pressure added to his shoulders, and a report done by Tricia Whitaker on the Bally Sports Sun broadcast today during the game was saying that Michael Wacha is going to be making a full return to the starting rotation with his looks to be start in Seattle on Friday. So another guy that they've been kind of handling with some kids' gloves, getting him stretched back out after a hamstring injury that sidelined him for a few weeks. So a guy that was in the rotation to begin the year and actually looked pretty decent, a couple 5-6 innings, scoreless outings, and I think that's really all you can ask from a guy like Wacha. So that is something to keep an eye on, how these pitchers maybe respond to that pressure, and really how the team as a whole has responded to it, because they're 0-2 since the injury, and they've got 4 games, at 10 o'clock Eastern starts, 3 out of the 4 against the Seattle Mariners team that they really should beat, but they are on a little bit of a hot run, and I think they're just a game under 500. So a team that I think the Mariners have the longest playoff drought going in professional sports right now. They're still around, you would say, in the AL wildcard hunt. So not a team that's out of it by any stretch, and the Rays historically have not been very good out in Seattle. So this is a very important test for this team, how they are going to respond to adversity. I think when you look at all these things, there's no question this really historic run that the team has been on, I think, is going to come to a close. It's going to be that, the second half of May and the first half of June is going to be this terrific run, and I think now on June 16th, we probably come to a close with back-to-back losses and a series loss as well to the Chicago White Sox. So right now we're going to take a short break. When we return, dive deeper into this afternoon's 8-7 loss and extras to the White Sox. And then at the end of the program, you want to stick around, we'll preview not just tomorrow's game against the Mariners, but we'll pretty much preview the whole series and talk a little bit more about Seattle's ball club. So you're definitely going to want to make sure to stick around for that. Number to call if you'd like to get on the show and talk Rays, 877-566-1020. You can also drop us a line on Twitter at WHBCOfficial to share your thoughts with us on that platform as well. So with that being said, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
You're listening to the Rays postgame on the William Haynes Show. We're live most nights within 15 minutes of the final out to break down everything that happened in that day's game and take listener phone calls to get your thoughts. As always, you call the show at 877-566-1020 or tweet the show at WHBCOfficial. Like you to remember that archives of previous shows can be found on this show's page on Speaker.com and also on the WHBC YouTube channel. We look forward to having some of you on the show. Thanks for calling in.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM. Sports Radio 66. Sports Radio
HBC. And at 10:45, we return on this late Rays postgame edition of the William Haynes Show. Number to call the program, 877-566-1020. You can also tweet us at WHBCOfficial. But officially tonight, or rather this afternoon's loss in the South Side in the rubber match, it was the Rays falling 8-7 in 10 to the Chicago White Sox. The Rays now fall to 17 games above 500, if my math is correct, at 43-26. They're still a major's best 24-12 on the road. And for the Chicago White Sox, they improved now to a major league best 43-25. They're 27-12 at home. And then you take a look at the AL East standings. It is the Rays with just a game and a half lead over Boston. And what's going to decide that? In the bottom of the 7th in Atlanta, it's the Red Sox 10-7 over the Braves. So it looks like, barring some kind of meltdown, the Red Sox are going to walk away with a win there tonight. And that would bring them within just one game back of first place. And let's take a look at just to see who Boston is playing next weekend, or rather this weekend when the Rays are in Seattle. And then the very next series for both of those teams after that will be against each other in Tropicana Field in what will be a marquee matchup. So the Red Sox are playing a best of 3 in Kansas City against the Royals this weekend before they head to the Trop. So a Royals team that's right at about 500 right now. And really the same for the Mariners, who the Rays will be playing. So it's going to be interesting, and the Rays are going to have to kind of get their act together if they want to be still the best team in the East when that series takes place next week. But getting back on track here with today's game, it was the victorious White Sox, 8 runs on 12 hits, 1 error defensively for them. That took place That was the Mendick error in the 8th inning that allowed Brasso to reach base to start the 8th inning. And then for the losing Rays, it was 7 runs on 9 hits, and then another error for them defensively as well, which probably a rare signing where they have errors in back-to-back games. It was a 2-bag error that allowed Brian Goodwin to drive in a run. It was on a bunt play that was botched. Yandy Diaz playing in at third base, and he just tries to get the out at first like he's supposed to do, but the throw was just no good, and it scored a run, and at that point, that allowed the White Sox to take that 7-2 lead. So a pretty costly error in there, and cost Yarbrough in the box score a couple of unearned runs. So that's unfortunate to see. This game was in 3 hours and 24 minutes in front of a pit attendance of 20,098 fans, which was a series high in Chicago, and probably a season high for the White Sox as well, potentially. The starting lineup for the Rays is as followed. Defense first, in the outfield from left to right, it was Austin Meadows in left, Kevin Kiermaier in center, Manuel Margot in right, and then in the infield from third to first, it was Yandy Diaz at third, Joey Wendell at shortstop, Brandon Lau at second base, Ji-Man Choi at first, Mike Zunino did the catching, and Randy Arozarena was the DH. So a bit surprising against the righty Giolito that they win as they did. I should have anticipated probably day game after night game, off day for Taylor Walls. As you know, usually when I look for off days, it's just when's the best spot to get it. And with Walsey being a switch hitter, you never really consider him in that discussion whether to sit him against a righty or a lefty. His split so far has been pretty even. He's a much better average hitter from the right side, but all the power stuff has come from the left, so you'd almost rather have him against a righty, I would say, personally. But they do give him an off day, and deservedly so. He has been playing a lot lately because it really does seem like a while since Wendell has manned shortstop. So you put him over there, and that allows you to get Yandy in the lineup and at third base. He's looked good so far this season. This was, if I had to say, probably his worst game defensively. Over at third, I was once again reminded that he is much better at first base. I was fooled for a little while there that he could have been maybe a third base guy, but you could see with that error today, and just kind of limited mobility. He did make a nice throw from his knees, but it had to be picked out of the dirt by Choi, so all in all, you would say not great, but you are able to get him in the lineup, of course, with Choi being at first base against a righty. And then as well with the outfield, they have Meadows play the field and Randy to DH, which I think Arozarena is probably better in left field, but maybe they just want to get Randy off his feet a little bit, and his double in the fourth inning extended his hitting streak to 11 games. So, of course, you got to keep him in the lineup and keep riding the hot wave, no doubt. I totally understand that. And something we were right about was Mike Zunino catching because Mejia, a night game, day after night game, you typically go to the other catcher. That's traditionally how things are done. And then how the batting lineup was structured. Leading off was Brandon Lau against the righty. That makes sense. Followed by Arozarena and Choi. Meadows hit cleanup. Followed by Diaz and Wendell. And a 7-8-9 of Margot, Kiermaier, and Zunino. So a couple of surprising things, no doubt. Lau to lead off against a righty, certainly to be expected. Randy in the 2 spot. I think that's really going to be against righties or lefties if he keeps, at least hitting like he is. The hitting streak has got him an average up to 263. Choi at 3 makes sense as well, lefty on righty. Austin Meadows to hit cleanup was a little surprising, but where else really are you going to put him? I maybe would have swapped out Meadows and Diaz, but at 4 and 5, there's not a huge discrepancy there. Wendell moving all the way down to 6, and then most surprisingly, maybe Manuel Margot all the way down to 7, righty on righty there, and a guy that's been hitting leadoff a lot lately. But I think Cash is trying to mix things up, and to an extent, when you score 7 runs, certainly it works out. And Margot, I would say a lot of us would agree, the player we would most like to have at the plate in a big RBI situation, because it seems like he always, maybe not always comes through, but is always going to put the ball in play, particularly on the ground. When you've got men on base with 2 outs, even with 2 strikes in a big spot. And that was exactly the case in the 8th inning where his RBI double, and they did end up calling it a double, so I have to rectify that. It did score Phillips from first base, so let me just notify that in the scorecard right now so I don't forget when I'm talking about that 8th inning later on. Everything, as I said, a little bit different, a little bit unconventional, you would say, but certainly that's kind of the way the Rays are used to doing things. The lineup as a whole, they strike out 12 times, which is a bit high. They walk only twice, which was hard to believe watching the late stages, especially considering how many advantageous counts they were working in. They saw 178 pitches, only 119 were for strikes, so 178, 119. So they obviously were getting a quite amount of balls pitched to them, but especially against Giolito, which was the same as it was against Dallas Keuchel last night. They were getting an advantageous count and either just flying out, grounding out, whatever, on a 2-1 pitch, something like that, or they were taking some strikes and allowing the pitcher to work back into count. So 2 walks, that definitely needs to be higher with this team's kind of formula for winning. It's just a very high volume of base runners, and a team that's not great with runners in scoring position. It's all about volume, getting as many runners in as many innings as you can, and hopefully you walk away with a couple of runs here and there. That's typically how the Rays have been able to do things. 40 total at-bats for the team today, 9 hits. So 1 out of every 4 at-bats is a hit, which, I mean, I guess is fine. And that's hitting, 200 on the day? So maybe not as great, but it looks good on paper. So, 2 walks, 12 strikeouts, not fantastic. And then, as I said, they go 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position, and a lot of those at-bats were late. I mean, 5 of those 13 alone were in the 9th and in the 10th inning. So, and anytime you play in extras, that number is going to be a little bit blown up. But make no mistake, that 1 for 13 rather, is pretty indicative of the team's performance in clutch situations. They did not even get a ton early, and that was a problem that they had yesterday as well, just not getting base runners, to lead off an inning or whatever. But they did come around a little bit later against a Sox pen that we were told was good, but they looked a little bit shaky here today, no doubt, and they leave a total of 6 men on base. Talking a little bit more just about the lineup as a whole, and then we'll kind of go down 1 through 9 the best we can. For Lucas Giolito, kind of a big fastball, low to mid 90s, but had good movement, kind of like a 2-seam. And then, as we've seen the last few days, a changeup and slider combo that are kind of interchangeable with their movement and speed, but there is a slight difference between the two. Although I would say watching it on the television broadcast, it was a little bit difficult to tell which one was which. The approach against him, looking total for Giolito, he established only 12 first pitch strikes to the 24 men that he faced, so that means half the hitters were starting 0-1 and half the hitters were starting 1-0, and so you would think that would translate to maybe more than 2 walks over 6 innings, but obviously that was not the case. For Giolito, 10 called strikes, 16 swinging strikes, 21 foul balls. So certainly the Rays were going more after his pitches than anything. They were really struggling against the changeup and slider early. They would foul off fastballs early in counts, get into 0-2, 1-2, whatever, and then there would be the changeup or the slider low in the dirt that they would chase. And then later in the game, not just against Giolito, but some of the other pitchers as well, there was a lot of changeups and sliders that were hung, just kind of weak, slow spinners up in the zone. And for the first time, or I guess you would say maybe the best job that the Rays have done at this season would be hitting that. Props to them, and what I'm trying to say, they did the best job against off speed as I've probably seen all season for the offense. So that was a good sign, and that's where a lot of their extra base hits came from. Arozarena's double in the second, and a slew of other hits as well. I would say, out of the 9 hits that the team had, I would say probably 5 or 6 were coming off of those off speed, and a lot of those were just kind of the cement mixer spinners as well. So that was good. A pitch that they were struggling against early, they're able to really crush their second or third time, seeing a starter. So that's a really good sign. And anytime you score 7 runs, of course you're doing a lot of things right. And that's really, you look at the scouting report for Giolito, that's about how things went. He had a no-hitter going with 1 out into the 4th, so they go down in order. In the first 3 innings, Lau was retired in the top of the 4th, and then an Arozarena double that followed, and the next 2 men, Choi and Meadows, struck out afterwards. They had a leadoff walk in the 5th, and a double to follow that made it 2nd and 3rd, and then Kiermaier with a 2 RBI double against a changeup up in the zone against Giolito to get the Rays on the board. With 2 outs, bases empty in the 6th, Yandy Diaz hitting a a pull, which is really good to see. A pull kind of line drive home run and for his 2nd of the year. So maybe his power number is getting turned around. We'll see. It only went 364 to left. It was on a 2-2 count. A changeup down and in, or middle in. I wanted to say that was an off-speed pitch when I was talking about it earlier, but I wasn't sure. So yes, it was a changeup that he did that, and both of his home runs were off of that pitch, I believe. Maybe the one against Texas was a slider. In the 7th inning, they get a 1-out single for KK, and then Zunino homers him in for his first home run in 11 games as he gets his 13th of the year. So good to see maybe Zunino finding his stroke again, as I think he was 0 for his last 13 or somewhere along those lines heading into today. So it was a pretty rough stretch for Z, and of course he was frustrated. And then really in the last 3 innings, the scoring opportunities were massive. It was Brasso getting on base to lead off the 8th inning on an error, but it was good with 2 strikes and a fastball kind of middle into him. He was able to put it in play with pretty decent exit velo. And standing at first base to start an inning, anytime you do that is good. Looking at the scorecard, they were only able to do that twice in 10 innings, get the first man aboard. So, and one of them had to be via an error. And then an Austin Meadows single made it runners at the corners with no outs. Yandy Diaz runs out a double play ball to drive in a run to bring the game within 1. And he was standing at first base. They pinch run him for Brett Phillips, so you got that going on the base path, and that really seemed to mess with the White Sox pitchers, as whether it was Bummer or it was actually Evan Marshall in that situation, spiking a lot of pitches in the dirt, fastballs missing away, just kind of lost his control there. So Phillips definitely doing his job there, no doubt. And then it was Margot with 2 outs and 2 strikes, where he thrives the most, hitting an RBI double, and Phillips able to go from first to home in what was a very exciting play, and was able to tie the game at 7-all there. In the 9th inning, they get a 1-out double to Brandon Lau, and that broke him out of an 0 for 4 today, where he had looked pretty awful at the plate. And so you're thinking, all right, they can get the run there, get the bullpen to lock it down, and they're coming away with this series victory. Instead, the next 2 men strike out. So just as had happened in the 4th inning, identical 1-out doubles, and the next 2 batters strike out. Instead of Choi and Meadows, as it was in the 4th, it was Arozarena and Brasso. And a tough at-bat probably for both of those guys. And for Randy, that strikeout in the 9th, I don't blame him too much for. It was a changeup, middle and well inside that he probably shouldn't have swung at, but he did get rung up on that pitch last night. I know a different home plate umpire. It was James Hoy last night, fielding Cool Breath today. But when things are going that way, you don't blame him for doing that, because the Rays have been forced really to expand their strike zone all series, and so that's just something that they've had to make an adjustment to. And then in the 10th inning, top of the 10th, with the runner at second base, Meadows strikes out, and then Taylor Walls hits a fly out that went all the way out. The left fielder for Chicago, Andrew Vaughn probably had one more step that he could have gone onto the warning track, and that ball would have been gone. A really good hit off the bat for Walls. Unfortunately, it stays in the park, so they were that close. And then Mejia on a pitch really down and away, I believe, or maybe it was down and in, got another ball out near the warning track as well. So they did have a chance there. And then, of course, the Sox walk it off in the bottom of the 10th. So those were kind of all the scoring opportunities that the team had tonight. Going through the hitters, 1 through 9. Brandon Lau in the leadoff spot, and he was good defensively. Turned a double play, so anytime we do that is good. He goes 1 for 5 with 2 strikeouts, an average that's managed to stay right at 200. So right at the Mendoza line. Call him Brandon Mendoza, if you will, but I will not do that. An on base of 305, which is 100 points higher, but still not fantastic, you would say. Really looked bad early. There was a sequence in the 5th inning where, they had runners at first and second with 1 out. And with 1 strike, chases a changeup down and away, strike 2. And then the very next pitch chases it again, below the zone for strike 3. So that was a very frustrating sequence. That's one thing that always sticks out to me whenever a guy is chasing the same pitch twice in a row in an at-bat, especially with men on base. It just shows that maybe they're not too comfortable at the plate and not feeling their best. So Brandon Lau, a guy that we're just, urging to kind of come out of this little slump or not little. I mean, we're 68 games into the season. It's we're almost half the season into the year. So and that was bad. So a couple strikeouts mixed in his first 4 outs, and really nothing to show for the fly out and the ground out. But a bit of a saving grace in the 9th inning, was able to hit a 1-out double, his 8th 2-bagger of the season. Looking at the ESPN kind of pitch tracking stuff just to see the situation. And that was an inning where obviously they had a chance really to do something. That was in the 9th. That's why it wasn't coming up in the 9th inning. A double to shallow left on an 0-1 count. Got a curveball kind of down and away. So a pitch he had been chasing really all game, he was able to go the other way with. So that's surprising as well, and just kind of a slicer that you're able to hit to the other way. So down the left field line. So that was an exciting play, and does get a hit, but by no means did he have a good day at the plate ultimately. I just, again, really looked uncomfortable, was struggling, was chasing stuff he shouldn't have. And in the runners with scoring position, game ends the day 0 for 1 in that category. That was, of course, that ugly strikeout in the 5th inning. Randy Arozarena in the 2 spot, he goes 1 for 5 as well with 3 strikeouts, an average that's down to 263, and on base of 340. He extended his hitting streak to 11 games, as I said, with his double in the 4th inning. That was also his 12th double of the season, and then 3 strikeouts in there as well. The one in the 9th that we talked about, a changeup. Well middle in that he shouldn't have gone at, but because of the strikeout looking yesterday, you can understand why he feels like he needs to go for that pitch. And kind of like Brandon Lau was just chasing a lot of stuff. He did hit the double off of a slider, and that's when the Rays were going really well against that pitch, kind of in the middle of the game, the 4th, 5th, 6th inning around there. But outside of that, was just kind of working bad at bats. He was fouling off fastballs early in counts and then chasing late, so that's a sign of another guy that's off balance, and was the DH, so did not play the field. But I think we'll still continue to hit at the top of the order and obviously play every day until maybe the hitting streak has run its course. Ji-Man Choi in the 3 spot, a rare kind of off day for him at the plate, although he's always working good at bats. 0 for 3 with a strikeout, an average, and very limited at bats. It's down to 288. Popped out in 1-2-3 in the 1st. Did strike out with Randy at second with one out in the fourth. Looking at that at bat there, and that was one where he threw the bat, so that's when you know he's really kind of off balance as you're kind of following the theme there. He did work the count full, so no surprise he's working a 3-ball count, and then it's just a changeup down and away. And he was getting kind of worked over a little bit by Giolito, although they were really going back and forth in that at bat. A good liner to second base to start the sixth, so did make pretty good contact and was just unlucky with it. And then it was pinch hit for in the eighth inning because the White Sox decided to go to their lefty Aaron Bummer. And so Mike Brasso pinch hits for him, and we'll just talk about that because he took his spot in the batting order. Mike Brasso pinch hit and then went to play third base, didn't have really any plays over there. Brasso on a fastball middle in was able to make a hard ground ball contact. Went right to the second baseman, right to Mendick, and he just muffed the play. So Brasso, good on him for running it out to start the eighth inning and get on base. And then in the ninth inning, he struck out with Lau at second and 2 outs. But I did not really think it was a horrible at-bat for him. Taking a look at it there, it was on a 1-2 count. He had taken a curveball, low ball 1, then swung at a fastball high and away, strike 1. Fouled off that same pitch for strike 2, so down 1-2. He gave him the fastball high and away again, and he took it. So instead of kind of doing the Lau approach where he's just continuing to chase the same pitch further and further out of the zone, he was able to kind of have some composure even with 2 strikes and take the pitch and even the count at 2-2, but then got the curveball down and away. So Marshall, the lefty, or rather the righty Evan Marshall, was working down and away, or really just away from Brasso the entire at bat. And that's certainly not when he's at his best. Seems like a lot of his hits are on the inner half of the plate. Kind of like Lau as well. So he ended up being 0 for 2 on the day was Brasso. And so with Choi and Brasso together in the 3 spot, they get a total of 0 for 5. So you look at the top 3 hitters. Lau 1 for 5, Randy 1 for 5, and an 0 for 5 from the 3 holes. So on a day where they score 7 runs, a lot of extra base hits to go around, but the bottom of the order did quite a bit of heavy lifting. Margot at the 7th spot, Kiermaier with a couple of hits, including a 2 RBI double. Margot, of course, had the tying hit in the 8th, and then Mike Zunino with a 2-run homer. So I know that's something that's talked about a lot. Winning in different ways, scoring runs in different ways, those things. And it was the guys maybe that you wouldn't quite expect, although Margot always seems to be coming through. In the cleanup spot, though, it was Austin Meadows, and he goes 1 for 5 as well. So it's not like it gets any better just yet with 3 strikeouts. So a tough day at the plate for him. And all the strikeouts came at the top of the order as well. No one else had more than 1 strikeout than the 1, 2, and 4 hitters. Lau with 2, Randy for 3, and Meadows for 3 as well. So just to prove my point to a more of an nth degree. Flew out to right to start the second, so was continuing to put the ball in the air. Then struck out a couple of times. Did it with Arozarena at second and 2 outs in the 4th. That pitch in that 4th inning, it was on a 2-2 count, and it was just a changeup down and away, and that's where Giolito was working him in that at-bat. Then struck out with 1 out in the 6th, and the bases empty. That pitch went down in 3 pitches. Took a fastball low in the zone, strike 1, and maybe Colbreth expanding the zone a little bit for Giolito going for his 6th inning. Then chased a fastball middle, or rather swung through it, and then chased a curveball down and in. So a very poor at-bat worked for him there. Hit a 1-out single in the 8th, which was good to see with Brasso at first base, so was able to move the ball with men on base, is what I'm trying to say, on a 1-0 count, and he just got a sinker kind of middle away. So that's how you know he's really at his best and can get pitches, is when he's getting hits away. And was a single to center, but anytime he's not just pulling the baseball, in this situation, I'll consider a pitch away to center to being kind of an opposite field hit for all intents and purposes. And then in the 10th inning was the first out when he struck out swinging against Burr. Fouled off a couple of fastballs, both outside, that would have been called balls. Then took a pitch down and in, fouled off another fastball, and then chased a cutter low and away in the dirt. So was getting a bit worked over there as well. And in left field, there was not, as far as I can remember, any real place to him. Just kind of some routine fly balls, but nothing crazy like Randy over there in left yesterday. And maybe that's why they gave Randy the day off, because he did have a bit of an adventure out there in left. In the 5 spot, it was Yandy Diaz. He goes 1 for 3 with 2 runs scored and 2 knocked in. Walk, his average is up to 259, and on base right at about 400. Popped down to 1-2-3 in the second. Worked the leadoff walk in the 5th. That was pretty easy. And then, of course, on that changeup, it was kind of middle into him, and he's able to hit a pull home run for the first time this season, and good for his second long ball of the year. Ran out a double play ball with runners at the corners and nobody out in the 8th. So you like to see him put the ball in play there in that situation, and also that he was running through the play. And then after that, it was pinch run for Phillips, who was able to do what he does and just be kind of naggy on the base path and screw with the pitcher a little bit. And Phillips comes to score for the tying run in the 8th. And then Walls comes in to play defense. And, of course, Walls, with that deep fly out to left in the top of the 10th, that in, I would say, probably 10 or 15 parks across Major League Baseball, that might have been a home run in. And that would have, of course, given them a 2-run lead going into the bottom of the 10th, and maybe things go differently. So that was a frustrating moment, but in a good way, just that Walls, and again, that was Walls from the left side. So it seems like that is where he's got a bit of a better power stroke, and the average numbers are a bit better from the other side. So I think in some ways good to see that he's not like an Ozzie Albies who's only really good from one side of the plate but can hit both. I think Walls is a legitimate hitter from the left or the right side of the plate. The number 6 hitter, Joey Wendell, today, and playing shortstop for the first time in a while, was 1 for 3. No walks, a strikeout, an average that's up to 286 as it's been fluctuating a lot lately. He hit his 18th double of the year. That came in the 5th inning with a man on first, so that made it 2nd and 3rd. And that set up the situation at Kiermaier where he drove those guys in. Struck out with the bases clear and 2 outs in the 6th. Struck out with a runner at first base in the 8th. And then, that strikeout in the 6th ended his day. He was pinch hit for in the 8th by Francisco Mejia. And Mejia, who was 0 for 3 yesterday and had a bit of a tough day at the plate, comes in and strikes out in that spot in the 8th. That situation, just a 4-pitch at bat, all strikes, 1 foul in there as well. And against the pitcher Bummer, who was the lefty, that means Mejia was at the right side of the plate and was just getting pitched kind of down and in the whole time and was chasing some stuff. So Mejia, certainly since coming off the IL, we've continued to repeat this, has not looked extremely comfortable at the plate. And then flies out to left on a pitch down and in as well, but did get it pretty far out to left field for the final out of the game, so that was a bit disappointing as well. The number 7 hitter today was Manuel Margot, and boy, has he, I think, really been having a really underrated season. Actually, we still need to talk about Wendell and Mejia. Wendell at shortstop looked very good. He does seem natural at short. And then interesting for Mejia, he pinch hits, of course, in the 8th, and comes in to play defense, not a catcher, mind you, but at first base. His first career appearance at first base, as they've been getting him some work, I guess, during infield drills before games. And he actually had a game-saving play in the 9th inning with a runner at second base, a line drive down the first base line that Mejia was able to corral. And, never playing first base before. Who knows the last time that he's done it, if ever, in his life. I mean, you'd assume maybe being a catcher that's kind of the natural thing. But was able to kind of get up and run over to first in time for the out. Did advance a runner But if that had gotten past him, that would have ended the game in the bottom of the ninth and would not have given the team a chance in extra. So really cool-headed play for Mejia there. That was interesting to see, and maybe we'll see him more at first base. It was really odd seeing him over there as well. Kind of like when we saw Brasso over at first, I think for the first time ever in New York against the Mets last season, if I recall correctly, and then did it into the postseason and into this season, of course, also. But now back to Margot and right. Speaking of defensive plays, he made a diving catch out there in right today where he had to kind of slide feet first. So that was good to see, and he's been terrific defensively, and you combine that with his bat, and he has turned into a very valuable player with the Rays. He goes 1 for 4 with a run knocked in, an average that's up to 241, and on base at 282, so probably one of the lowest walk rates on the team, but an extremely high chase rate as well. But more so than not, is making contact, not just chasing. All 3 of his outs were on balls put in play. A pop out to start the third inning. Did hit a ground ball with runners at second and third, so did put the ball in play, but the runners were not able to advance, unfortunately, so not a productive out. Grounded out to the pitcher to start the seventh, and then, of course, that RBI double that tied the game in the eighth. It was kind of legendary is not the right word for it, but just a really just gritty, memorable at-bat where he worked the count full against the righty Evan Marshall, and was just he went down 0-2. So then you're thinking, oh boy, is Margot gonna kind of screw up here? But instead, takes some pitches, fouls a bunch off, and then on a changeup, down and in. So another example of the Rays hitting that pitch. He is able to really hit it hard and get into the gap there in left center. And scored Phillips, who was with on a 3-2 count and 2 outs, was running really on a first movement, and boy was he flying around the base path. He would not have come in to score if not for that situation, because he would, I doubt would have been kind of running there potentially, but it was the right situation, and they were able to tie the game off of it. And as I said, was good defensively as well. At the 8th spot, Kevin Kiermaier had another pretty good day at the plate, another multi-hit game, and not too much action in center today. 2 for 4 with 2 runs knocked in, no walks, no strikeouts. So good to see him putting the ball in play as well, all 4 of his at-bats. An average that's up to 234, and on base at 288. So again, not a guy that's walking a whole ton either. But when he's at his best, not really walking, but just hacking and slashing down both baselines. Popped out in the third, and then with runners at second and third and 1 out, it kind of felt like do or die time in a I believe the situation there was they were down 4-0. So in the fourth, so that he was able to score 2. It was just on kind of a hung changeup, and he just hit it all the way out basically to the wall, and brought a couple of runs in. Good for his is that right? 7th double of the season. So pretty good numbers for him, I would say, as well as Kiermaier, always a frustrating player, but when he's going well, you just wish that he could do more of it. In the 9th spot, Mike Zunino was 1 for 3 with 2 knocked in. That was on the long ball, 1 walk and no strikeouts. So good to see that as well. More walks than Ks. An average that's just under the Mendoza line at 194, and is walking quite a bit with an on-base at 291, but that's still not a very high on-base percentage. And even with that, a very high slugging. The highest of anyone in the lineup today at 504, which is very surprising. After that double by Kiermaier, Giolito had kind of lost his stuff, and Zunino just accepted the walks to give him credit for that, certainly. And then in the 7th inning, with 1 on and 1 out, he hit his 13th 13th home run of the season, his first in 11 games, as he had been really in an extreme slump. And in the 7th inning, that would have been against the White Sox pitcher, the righty Cody Hewer. So righty on righty, 395 to left on an 0-2 count, where he had taken 2 sliders for strikes. Gets the slider again, this time down and in, which is definitely his pitch. When he's slumping, He's chasing away, but when he gets pitches on the inner half, especially down when he can just go golfing and go get it, he has had a lot of success there. So good to see him get back on the board with the home run. And by the way, by the All-Star break in 2018, Wilson Ramos, the catcher, 14 home runs. Zunino's got 13. So just to put that in perspective, I think is important. And then popped out to start the ninth. And as always, it is good and sturdy behind home plate and calls a good game as well. And then on the pitching side, as we try and kind of wrap up this discussion quickly here, and again, number to call the show, 877-566-1020, tweets at WHBC Official. If we've got anyone live here tonight, Ryan Yarbrough getting the start, and hard to judge this one. I think you could really go either way with it. 6 1/3, 7 total runs, only 5 earned on 10 hits. Only 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, a home run allowed. 96 pitches, 67 for strikes. And even with the 7 total runs allowed, was still very efficient, which I think is very Yarbrough-esque. 81 pitches after 5, 89 after 6. And they gave him a chance to get all the way through 7. But I think the first base runner he allowed, they were going to pull him, and he allowed a 1-out single to Andrew Vaughn. Out of the 30 men he faced, threw first pitch strike to 17 of them, so just over 50% is not good. So getting into a lot of favorable counts. But the pitch to strike ratio was pretty good, as I said, 96 to 67. Early in the game, especially, but really throughout, just a lot of taken pitches, and he, I thought, had pretty good control, had pretty good feel for his stuff, so he was getting ahead of guys pretty early for Yarbrough. Just to give you an idea, 21 called strikes out of his 67, so that's about a third of the strikes were taken pitches. 8 swinging strikes only, and 14 foul balls, and then 24 in-play strikes, which seems like a high number, but maybe I'm overplaying that. But illustrating my point of a lot of taken pitches, and he would talk about the race to 2 strikes. He had gotten 0-2 pretty early, and was really cruising through 3. Had allowed a couple of singles to that point, but had no real threats, and it just seemed like the White Sox were maybe not seeing him well or what. But as we see somewhat often for Yarbrough, the second time through the order and the third time tends to be a bit treacherous, and it was really as the script completely flipped, and guys were going after first pitches, second or third pitches, whatever. They were seeing the same pitches that they did in their first at bat, but they just talked themselves into going for it. Kind of that change up at 78, kind of down and away, but just right at the corner of the strike zone. And Colbreth was ringing them up all day, and so as I said, the hitters kind of talking themselves into going for that pitch, and just kind of dumping them into the opposite field for a lot of hits. One of the most glaring instances of this was the lefty Zach Collins, a 2 RBI single in the 4th that made it 4-0 Sox, and the exit velocity was 68 miles an hour off the bat. That's the same speed as a Yarbrough curveball. A hard hit ball from a hitter is considered to be 100 miles an hour, and that was off the bat at 68. So Yarbrough great at inducing weak contact, and even when he's giving up hits, it's still weak contact. He's not really getting crushed all too often. It is pretty hard to square him up, especially that changeup. But that was the pitch. His best pitch started to go against the Orioles, where he went 6 and allowed, I think, 2 or 3 runs. I think it was 3. And looked to be a pretty good pitch this afternoon, but a much better lineup. There's no question the White Sox offense leaps and bounds ahead of Baltimore. So I think really that's kind of the thing, whether he's playing the Yankees or the Astros or the White Sox and even the Red Sox when he played against them early this year, that kind of makes the difference. Lineups that are more veteran laden and that know how to play against pitchers like this, and the second or third time through the order do their damage. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Yarbrough is going to have some more weight on his shoulders with the injury of Glasnow. I would say, I mean, if I had to say right now, he's probably the ace of the staff. And not that he is an ace, but just that 41-year-old Rich Hill, I just don't necessarily see that, a two-pitch guy. So Yarbrough is probably the most qualified out of anyone until maybe McClanahan steps up. And then behind them, you're talking about Fleming and Waka, guys that you don't feel horrible about, but are not high up on your list either. So if this is going to be your ace, 7 runs on 10 hits, that's going to be a bit treacherous. But it is going to be always up and down for Yarbrough. And his ERA is still under 4 at 3.91. So still having himself a good season. But it does seem like we are a long ways away from that complete game against the Yankees just, 2 starts ago. But maybe he'll find that form again. An interesting point, and something I always talk about, it seems like he's at his best when he's working the cutter up and into righties. That's where things kind of fell apart as well. As I'm looking at my notes here, if I pause throughout the show, it's because I'm trying to read my notes and find the points that I wanted to bring up, and I'm kind of losing them. He started working inside the hitters in the 4th, and it really didn't work out because that's where all the hits were coming from. And those were the ones that they were pulling, and then later in the game they were kind of dumping opposite field change-ups rather, or going the other way on that pitch. But whether it was the curveball that he was pitching a lot inside to lefties, or the cutter up and into righties, whatever the situation, they were just hitting it really well. And I bring that up because it seems like he's at his best when he can work inside with the cutter, but that was definitely not the case today. He would have been better off just continuing to pitch away as it had worked the first 3 innings, but I understand the second time through the lineup you've got to show different looks. But for whatever reason, Chicago's lineup was ready for it, and give them credit, especially with all the guys that they've got out right now, that they're still playing at this level. I just wanted to air this out one more time. Not that I really want to be pumping up the White Sox, although these teams, I think, very well may be meeting later this season. And I'm not just talking about the August matchup at the Trop. For the key injuries for the White Sox, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, and Nick Madrigal, some of the better prospects in Major League Baseball that have been terrific for them. I mean, Eloy Jimenez was the Silver Slugger last year, Luis Robert a Gold Glover, and Nick Madrigal had a 300 average when he went down. So that they're missing all those guys and they're still playing at this level. Chicago, I mean, they're definitely legit. I was hearing that, I mean, this series was more important to prove themselves than it was for the Rays, as Tampa Bay, I guess, was already established. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. I think the Rays really wanted this opportunity to kind of showcase their stuff on a bigger stage, but with their first series loss in 9 tries, as they were 7-0-2, as I was trying to find earlier, again, as I kind of blew the show open. If we've got anyone listening here, you want to peek behind the curtain. But anyway, for Yarbrough, I'm very much anticipating his next start. I don't know when it'll be. Looking at the schedule here, how things are going to line up. Ooh, the series, the game 1 of the best of 3 against Boston. It looks like it's going to be his day on the mound. It looks like it'll be Yarbrough, Hill, and Waka, that series against Boston. So that's going to be a very big and a very important test for Yarbrough. And he's going to get a chance really to establish himself, and we'll really see again. I'm looking very much forward to that. The other guys out of the pen, it was Chris Mazza, as Yarbrough had exited the game with 1 out in the 7th after allowing a 1-out single. And Mazza, who has not played since April, I think with shoulder inflammation, had been on the injured list and then has been pitching with Durham quite a bit and struck out both batters that he faced, 8 pitches, 6 strikes, and kind of like Trevor Richards before he got traded to the Brewers, had shown some nice stuff in his first start back, or first appearance back rather. It's kind of 2 pitches, it's like kind of a sinker and a slider maybe, but they both had really good movement, so I was impressed, and he's the guy that can give them length. So maybe with Glasnow being down, they already sent him down. The reason for Mazza even being on the roster today, and he must have been on the taxi squad that they could have called him up for an afternoon game, but Colin McHugh, they had to put him on the COVID-related IL. McHugh is vaccinated for COVID-19, but he was getting symptoms, I guess, so they had to put him in the protocol. McHugh ended up testing negative, but so I guess it was just a cold or flu-like symptoms or whatever, and he's already activated, and so Mazza goes back down to Durham. But Mazza, a guy that we could see, there's a lot of pitchers coming back. Anderson, Rowe, Drake, maybe even Poche later on. So it's definitely going to be a crunch that you can only have 13 or 14 of these guys. But good to know that we've got good depth at the AAA level, of course. JP Fireeisen, and what was really interesting, ended up getting the 8th. And the reason why I say it's interesting is because he ended up facing all three lefties. 2 true lefties in Jake Lamb and Zach Collins, and a switch hitter in Lurie Garcia. So basically just 3 guys hitting from the left side against the righty Fireeisen. I'm not quite sure about his splits, but it seems like a guy that you would want probably against righties. But as we mentioned, when he's going, has stuff that can play to both sides. He's got this slider that can go down and into righties, a changeup that can go down and away. And so it's basically just the same, but in inverse to lefties. He can go down and in, down and away, and fastballs up in the zone. That's his thing. And really was working it. And for the second straight time, his stuff looked really, really good. Striking out Lamb, looking, and then getting 2 pretty easy outs to follow. 10 pitches, 8 strikes, and what was really a shutdown 8th inning. So that was really good to see. Castillo gets through the 9th, facing the 9-1-2 hitters. A little bit of a bumpy start. A bit of a bumpy start. A leadoff double to the 9-man, and the White Sox get more hits out of their 9-man than any team in baseball. Mendick doubling to start. He gets to third base later, but strikes out Tim Anderson, the leadoff hitter, who has been absolutely killing the Rays this series. And then Brian Goodwin, that really hard hit ball down the first base line that Mejia, and again playing his first career time ever at first base, was able to make a nice play unassisted for the out that moved Mendick to third. And then striking out Andrew Vaughn, who had 3 hits, was 3 of 4. And Castillo strikes him out with a couple of sliders that he probably should not have been swinging at. Sticker slider was going in full effect. I did not think he looked his best, just his stuff wasn't there, and it seems like we're far removed from his days of throwing some wiffle ball type pitches in 2018 and 2019. But I think even without that, it's still a serviceable guy, but I'm not quite sure what the issue is. And then in the 9th inning, and really what's going to make all the headlines, Pete Fairbanks, or maybe Yarbrough will get the headlines, but at the bullpen, Fairbanks only got 1 out into the 10th. Had gotten the reigning MVP Abreu to ground out to move Vaughn to third, and he had no room for error, no room to breathe, really. A runner at second with no outs in the bottom of the 10th in a tie game. So that runner comes to score, game over, walk-off. So he was backed into a corner, and for whatever reason was not trusting his fastball. I believe out of his 5 pitches, only 1 was a fastball, so he was going slider, curveball pretty much all the time. And that was something that he said post-game that he was really frustrated with, kind of an expletive-laden frustration quote from him. He didn't seem too happy with himself and expressed some frustration with just the extra inning rule in general. Some guys like it. Pete Fairbanks noted extra inning runner rule, whatever, anti-fan, whatever you want to say, opponent, and the word I was looking for. You'll have to excuse me. It's just a tough break. Again, the Rays now 3-6 in extras. It's their fault for backing themselves into this kind of corner, especially on the road when you don't score. I can't tell you, and it makes sense with how bad they are with runners in scoring position. I can't tell you how many times. Runner at second, nobody out, and you can't bring him in. They had Meadows to start in the top of the 10th and decided not to bunt with Brasso being the runner. They just let him swing, and he strikes out. Walls, he almost did hit a home run, so I have to keep that in mind. But just bring the run in, because you're putting these pitchers in bad situations, and Fairbanks, for whatever reason, didn't want to go to his fastball, and that ended up costing him. It was a slider down and in to the switch hitter Yasmani Grandal hitting left, and it just hit a rocket out to right. only goes down in the books as a single because of the nature of the walk-off, but was, a double or triple off the bat. And Grandal, a great hitter, but he's only hitting 152. You want to talk about splits. A 152 average, 387 on base. He's walking more than anyone in baseball with a 150 average. So that's basically just Yandy Diaz at a more extreme level, which is just amazing. And Yandy Diaz is hitting 100 points higher than Grandal with the same on-base percentage, that blows my mind. And Grandal, the guy that gets the walk-off hit, so a tough break for Fairbanks. I don't really knock him. He's been great lately, so hopefully Kevin Cash sticks with him. Feyereisen looking great again. Mazza proving that we've got some depth at the minor league level. Castillo still in some kind of funk, but ended up preventing the walk-off, so the story would have been a lot different had he not. And he has Francisco Mejia to thank over there with a nifty play at first base also. And then what was an eventful start for Ryan Yarbrough. So at this point, as we close the book and turn the page on today's loss, we will turn our attention to tomorrow's game and really the whole series against Seattle. But before that, we're going to take a short break. Again, number to call the program, last call for some phone calls at 877-566-1020. You can drop us a line on Twitter at WHBC Official if you'd like to share your thoughts on there. But without further ado, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey Rays fans, William will be right back. We're in a commercial break, so don't touch that dial. Remember, you can call us internationally toll-free at 877-566-1020 or tweet us your thoughts at WHBC Official. Also, we'd like you to stay tuned for William's other podcasting projects at speaker.com/user/WHBC.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM. Sports Radio 66. Sports Radio
HBC. And at 11:40, we return on the William Haynes Show as we are putting a wrap on the program. We have finished our discussion of not just today's loss to the White Sox, but the series loss as a whole. And so now we look ahead to a weekend series, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4-game set in Seattle against the Mariners, the second of 2 West Coast road trips that the Rays will have this season. So the last time they'll be out there, at least in the regular season. So 3 out of the 4 games are 10:10 Eastern Time starts. So I guess we'll try it out tomorrow night to see if we can come on at 1:30 in the morning or whatever. Not that we haven't done it before, but we'll try it, and then maybe we'll have to work something out. I don't know how, but we'll play it by ear, and make sure you're following us at WHBC Official for all programming updates and things like that. But it'll be an interesting series. I know probably the least watched Rays games of the year whenever they're out on the West Coast like this. We were able to avoid the 10:10 starts last time, some 9:30s, so a little bit better, but not perfect. And then a weekend series in there as well with some day games. But this is going to be different. Looking at Seattle, they're 1 game under 500, and it looks like by night's end they'll be 2. In the 5th at home, they are down 7-0 to the Twins, but they've already wrapped up that series. They took the first 2 games, so they're still going to win it, is what I mean. They're at 34-35 right now, 19-14 at home. And then just as a reminder, the Rays are 43-26, 24-12 on the road. Tomorrow's game that we'll get to in a minute is Rich Hill against Justin Dunn, the righty. Dunn with a 3.91 ERA. And then the rest of the series for between these two teams, it's going to be Michael Wacha against Kikuchi, Fleming against Gilbert on Saturday, and then McClanahan against Gonzalez on Sunday. I don't know a ton about those guys, but we'll preview them as the weekend goes on. But really for the Rays this weekend, Hill, Wacha, Fleming, and McClanahan before the Rays return home against Boston. And that's going to be tough. Okay, so Sunday they have a 4:10 game in Seattle, 4:10 Eastern time. The next day, 27 hours, they've got a game all the way across the coast at the Trop against the Red Sox. So I don't like that, how that looks. And the 10-10 starts are going to be rough probably for the team, even with them playing in the Central Time, this series against Chicago. So I don't know. It's going to be up in the air. Seattle is a place where the Rays have struggled historically, as would make sense. East Coast teams are usually never really good out there. But it's, for whatever reason, in Seattle, and at times can be a difficult place to play, I think. Taking a look at what Seattle has done lately, they have won their last three. A series finale against Cleveland, and then 2 games against Minnesota, and it looks like they're going to lose the third game against the Twins here tonight against 7-0 in the fifth. They've been .500 for pretty much the entire month of June, going back and forth. So flip-flopping for about 2 weeks. So obviously we know kind of what that feels like, and it's not a very good feeling. And I'm surprised they're even this much in the hunt. Really the only time they've gone mainstream with any kind of story was Jared Kelenic, their top prospect that they got in the Edwin Diaz trade from the Mets, was sent down. There was all this stuff about service time manipulation, and so they were basically pressured into bringing him up, and he was not ready, I think. Was batting under 100, like .098 in his first 80-something at-bats. It was really, really bad, and we talked about that in reference to a potential Wander Franco call-up and all those things. So, unfortunately, we won't get to see Kelenic, because I was maybe looking forward to that. There's not a ton, really, on the Seattle roster that you would be familiar with. Just pulling up the roster right now. Of course, they've got Kyle Seager's brother, Corey. And, of course, Kyle Seager won the World Series MVP against the Rays last year. Not a ton of pitchers that are well known. I mean, Yusei Kikuchi from Japan has been playing for quite a while, and I mean has been fine for Seattle for all those years that he's been with them. They have former Ray Jake Bowers, so we'll see a reunion with him. J.P. Crawford, Mitch Haniger, so not a ton of real impact players. They're third in the AL West, not that they're in the running for the division, and it looks like by tomorrow they'll be 2 games under. So a team that's still in the mix, but also a team that really the Rays should be dispatching of rather easily. And then without further ado, previewing tomorrow's contest at 10:10, it'll be the lefty Rich Hill against the righty Justin Dunn. Starting with the Rays pitching side, Rich Hill, the 41-year-old left-hander, is 5-2 on the season with a .338 earned run average. His last time out against Baltimore went 5 2/3, 4 runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. His last couple starts have not been so good. Or really, it was just the Baltimore start, because before that he had a couple of 5-inning scoreless starts. And then the time before that, 8 innings, 2 runs against Kansas City. So that Baltimore start on the 12th was really his first back down to earth, and gave me some worry maybe about him. He put the O's down in order in the first 4 innings, and then, of course, yes, the refresher, it was the grand slam in the 5th that basically did him in. It was a leadoff walk, a wild pitch, another walk later in the inning with 2nd and 3rd, and then the home run to the 9-man Austin Wynns, who had not hit a home run in his career. That was a start where he was not getting the curveballs called for strikes. He didn't have a good feel for it, reminiscent to some of his early starts where he just couldn't put it where he wanted to. And then you're backed into a corner where you're having to throw, 87-mile-an-hour 4-seams in hitters' counts, and that's just not going to work out for you. So it's pretty much entirely dependent on his feel for the curveball and how willing his opponents are willing to go chase it, because even if you really sell out, you're not going to hit that curveball, or at least very hard. And with the defense the Rays have behind him, you always feel good about that if they're making even contact off of the curveball. So 50-50. I mean, let's say he goes maybe 5 innings tomorrow, maybe 6, but everyone in the bullpen is in play. You would think the only guys that would be actually, no one would be going on a back-to-back, or I'm sorry, no one would be going a third straight day. Obviously, Fire Eyes and Castillo, Fairbanks, the A-Pen would be going on a back-to-back, but that's no biggie, although it's been a little bit since the last off day, but I think it would be fine. Kittredge, Thompson, Whistler, kind of the B-Pen, if you will, is all ready to go, so they could really mix and match it any way that they want to. And then finally, just for Rich Hill, something I wanted to bring up. There was a story in the Times, I'm trying to find it, where Hill was kind of coming out and saying the same thing that Rich Hill did about the sticky stuff, and just saying that it was the wrong move to do the ban midway through season. Rich Hill, obviously not a guy that uses it, at least not that you would see with his spin rate and velo. But obviously coming in defense of his injured teammate Glasnow and all those things, and put a conspiracy out there that it was done by Major League Baseball to kind of turn the players against each other with the upcoming collective bargaining agreement due, so that they weren't going to unite for a strike, that kind of stuff. So Rich Hill, I guess, noted MLB conspiracy theorist. It was interesting, some of the thoughts he had to say, and a guy that's always pretty thoughtful, or at least is always willing to speak his mind. And Hill will be, he has been in the discussion in the national landscape with this stuff going on, with his comments put out recently, and so fittingly so, he'll get a chance to pitch on the mound, and one of his first couple starts after all this stuff from MLB has come out. So intriguing to see how he pitches up in Seattle, and I can't imagine has done it too much in his career up in Seattle. For the Mariners, going against the Rays, it'll be the righty Justin Dunn. The 25-year-old righty is 1-3 on the season with a 391 earned run average. His last time out got dinged up pretty good for his worst start of the year. In fact, 3 innings, 5 runs on 9 hits against the Cleveland Indians, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, 72 total pitches thrown. A lot of kind of 5-inning, 1-run starts. I mean, against Texas, San Diego, Baltimore, Detroit, Boston, Baltimore again. So just kind of an average type pitcher, and makes sense, an ERA under 4. So he'll be fine. Looking at that start against Cleveland, just to see what he'll be dealing. And coming off the worst start of his season, that's always probably a good thing. He's got a fastball that sits low to mid-90s, a slider at 83 off of that, a curveball at high 70s, so it looks like that's it. He's a fastball, curveball, slider, guys. I'm not seeing anything else in there, so not necessarily going to be easy, but again, as with the whole series, a guy that they should be doing pretty well against. And with a righty on the mound, as was the case today, I mean, pretty traditional stuff. Lau to lead off, and I'll be at second. I can't imagine Yandy would be playing again. Probably Wendell at third, Walls back at shortstop, Lau at second, Choi at first base, and then probably Randy to be back in the field, Kiermaier in center, Margot in right, and then if they want to, they can DH Meadows, and then Zunino, who's making his return to Seattle, has done it, I think, a couple, or once with the Rays at least, after his trade in November of 2018, and he looks forward to that. And so that'll be a storyline going on during the series as well. I would imagine he'll probably be back at catcher, although they could, if they don't want righty on righty, they could certainly have Mejia, and he can even play first base. So that was an interesting development, of course, from today's game as well. So as we put a wrap on the program, we're trying, I promise you, we're trying to get these programs shorter. I was like, all right, can we get it maybe an hour show tonight? We end up going an hour 20 again. So if you'll stick with me, I guarantee you it's going to be easy when we're on the air at 1:30 in the morning. this weekend to get a quick program because I'm just going to be wanting to go to sleep. But either way, thanks for tuning into the program. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at WHBC Official. Follow the show page on Spreaker.com where you're listening to the show. We'll be on the air after tomorrow's game, about 1:30, whenever it ends. Again, make sure to stay tuned for that. We look forward to being on the air. As always, we'll see you then.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM and Sports Radio 66. The Fan.
HBC.
W